It is an absolute honour to be here with you all today in Bloomberg, which is still one of the most exciting buildings to walk into. And I've really been looking forward to speaking to all of you because I can't think of a more exciting place in the world to be thinking about and talking about innovation and entrepreneurship. But I wanted to start with a story about a business, I guess it's quite close to my heart. So I want you to sit back and think back to that heady world of the 1970s. ABBA was in the charts. Let's be honest, a few of us were wearing flares, and Morecambe and Wise were doing that old dance on the Christmas special. And I was about 6 or 7 years old, and I remember going with my grandfather Asher to his market stall where he used to sell fabrics. And it was such a treat because I would go with him in his van, and it was the days before we had health and safety, so I was there on the back of all the rolls of fabric, bouncing around on the top. And he would be telling me stories about his customers and how he'd bought the pink one for Doris and he'd bought the tartan one for Alice. And then you'd see him in there and he'd be there selling to all of his customers. He knew them all by name and he bought the product for each and every one of them. Business in those days was personal. You went to your local shop, they knew you, they bought for you, and you had a relationship with the owner. Those businesses, they knew your name, and they really could anticipate your each and every need. And I think if we look back now on that period, this really was a golden age of service. And advertising in that day was really about word of mouth. That's how you really got the message out there. Fast forward 30, 40 years, and we saw the explosion of mass media, information, choice. But I think what it also did was to erode those very personal relationships that we had with our local storekeepers, people like my grandfather. TV, radio, print all came along, and they made it really easy for businesses to reach out at scale, and we lost personal connections along the way. And today, we are drowning in information and content, and people can choose to interact with whoever they want, whenever they want, and really on whatever device they choose. And so in this environment, in order to drive growth, people can no longer market at people. They've got to market for people, just in the way that my grandfather used to do. Because technology today has given businesses the tools and opportunity to connect with people in a two-way conversation. And so today, to really realize the full potential of what the opportunity creates, we've got to move from a disruptive conversation to a way that we can connect people's experiences. Now, an example of this that really caught my imagination recently, and probably a lot of you saw it, was the explosion of the no makeup selfie. Did anybody see this that ran on Facebook and other platforms? This has become one of Cancer Research UK's most successful campaigns ever. But what's so interesting about this story is it wasn't created by Cancer Research. It was created by a very young mum, teenage mum, a lady called Fiona Cunningham from Stoke-on-Trent. And like many people in the room, I'm sure, she'd been affected by family members that had, been lost to cancer. So she thought it would be an interesting idea for people to show support to cancer charities. She just happened to choose Cancer Relief. And she did that magnificent taboo thing of saying to her girlfriends, let's all put a picture up of us, God forbid, not wearing any makeup. And there was just something about the insight that she had there, that within just a couple of weeks, over 2 million people had got involved. 2 million people had put pictures up, and they donated over £8 million to charity. And I just think that that is absolutely incredible, that a teenager from Stoke-on-Trent can create a movement, a life-changing movement of 2 million people. And if you just put that into context, what her fundraising skills achieved, she's achieved the fact that now Cancer Research are going to fund 10 new research clinical trials. Now, I've been at Facebook for just almost a year, and every day I'm seeing countless stories about individuals, businesses, not-for-profits, startups, how they're utilizing this platform, this incredible platform, and really doing things in a scale both large and small. And that really reminds me, I think, of the huge opportunity that's ahead for each and every one of us. If I take a different example, the story of a man called Malcolm Bell. Malcolm's the co-founder and CEO of a business called Zagora. Anybody know Zagora here? Okay, let me tell you about Zagora. It's a UK-based e-commerce startup, started in 2011 by Malcolm and his wife Desi. And they started it with £25,000 of their own money. They make hot pants. okay? I can see a few people kind of going, okay, I'm interested in Zagora now. These hot pants are really cool because when you exercise, they heat your body up. And so that makes the exercise even better, apparently. If people do exercise, they absolutely assure me that that is the truth. Now, what's so interesting about Zagora is that they built their entire business on social media. And what they did in the very early days was they sent 500 pairs of these hot pants out to people. And all that they asked of people was to say, use it, do your exercise, and then tell us what you think about it, and post it on Facebook. And that is exactly what people did. They put it on, they went to exercises, and the results are incredible. You know, you do get a better workout feel and fitter and faster as a result. Not fatter, the absolute result, the opposite of that, I'm absolutely sure. And so this business absolutely exploded. And so just back to the way that my grandfather would recommend the different fabrics, and the women would come along, because it was women in those days that were buying the fabrics, and would recommend it to the different people. That is exactly the same as what Zagora was able to do. And in just 3 years, Zagora now has 500,000 customers around the world, and they're shipping to 130 countries from the UK. And I think this is an incredible example of a British business that's thinking global. So just because you're making it here, you don't just have to sell here anymore. You can go global. And so this rise of digital technology is really creating challenges for business owners. But it's also creating unbelievable opportunities for customers to engage in a way, in new, much more personal ways than we've ever been able to do, and crucially, at an unprecedented scale, like we've seen with Malcolm. And we are at now a really important milestone in consumer behavior that I think is fundamental to understanding the role that platforms like Facebook can play in adding value to business today. This year, in the UK, for the first time ever, the amount of time that people will spend on digital media, and by that I mean tablets and phones and desktop, is going to surpass the amount of time that people spend watching television. So we are seeing an incredible shift in consumer behavior that we have never seen before for most of us in our lifetimes. In fact, we haven't seen it since TV overtook radio 50, 60 years ago. And the key to this shift is mobile. So this isn't simply a matter of people choosing to move from one screen or another. This is a radical transformation of how all of us, just think about how you're using your technology, how we're discovering, how we're sharing, and how we're connecting and engaging with the world. People are moving much, much quickly today. And business, quite frankly, is struggling to keep up with them. And they're struggling to keep up with the growth. And we all need to catch up. Now, you might be looking at me and think, oh, that's easy for you to say, Facebook, you're a tech company, you know, you were born young, you were born small, you know, you're only 10 years old, as Katie said. But actually, if I'm honest with you, we too were caught unaware by this incredible shift to mobile. And so 2 years ago, Mark Zuckerberg turned around to the whole company and said we needed to be a mobile-first company in order that we could be a mobile-best company. Now, how many engineers are in the room here today? You. Okay, we've got 2. Okay, so you're going to understand what I'm saying. So for Mark to turn around and say we're going to code mobile first from tomorrow, that is like learning another language tomorrow, isn't it? That's like everything that you've learned today, we're now going to change and do it radically different. And you're going to have to do it overnight. And so what that meant was that when the engineers were coming into the bit in to see Mark, because Mark reviews all the key products that we're developing, he wasn't going to accept anything that wasn't coded mobile first. And it was only by having such a dramatic pivot that we could really embrace where the technology's gone today. And what that's meant for us specifically is that if I look back 24 months ago, Facebook had 0 revenue coming from mobile. And today, just 24 months later, we've now got 59% of our revenues coming from mobile. So what does this say for us? I think what this says for us is the fact that speed and sense of purpose has been absolutely crucial in getting us to where we are today. And the sense of agility, acknowledging that you need to move fast and need to be nimble, is really something that I've learned from working a company that's headquartered in the Valley. So what are the differences between the UK and the US? Well, you'll know better than me the old Winston Churchill joke of the fact that the UK and the US, 2 nations divided by a common language. I think there is some truth in that. But I also wanted to share some observations on the tech scenes in the US and the UK, and what are the areas that are absolutely crucial for driving growth. And the first thing that I've learned, and I'm incredibly grateful to my colleagues in the US, is to really understand the need to be fearless. And you see that a lot in US companies. Because the fear of failure is really critical in harming a startup business and a startup ecosystem. Because entrepreneurs and investors will be less willing to take risks and big risks, and therefore that leads to less big disruptive ideas. And maybe that's part of the reason that we saw in those numbers that we think it's going to be at least 5 and maybe 10 years before we'll see the next big Facebook or Google coming from these shores. So if you come to our offices, you'll see some incredible propaganda posters all over the place. They're very persuasive and they're very provocative. So we have things like done is better than perfect, proceed and be bold, and move fast and break things, and many others as well. Now these things are not to be taken literally, because we don't really want to go around and break things. But what we do want to do is to promote a culture that encourages behaviors that are associated with free thinking and with action. And removing this fear of failure is so important in setting you on a path to succeed faster. And this is absolutely essential for innovation, which, as we all know, goes on to unlock growth. Now, one of the things that really excites me about the UK is I think we're really starting to see this mindset being adopted and starting to bloom. Because if I look at London's role now in the tech startups in Europe, I think we're the hub here. And we're seeing some brilliant new companies being developed that didn't even exist 2 or 3 years ago. So 3 years ago, Funding Circle, I'm sure you know Funding Circle, didn't exist. But it now lends over £300 million to Britain's small businesses. Or look at the global success of businesses like Mind Candy, or my own personal addictive love of King.com, and the wonderful Candy Crush. Is there a few people in this room that have played Candy Crush maybe more than once? You're not being honest with me. The numbers don't say that. You're not being honest with me. But we also have something here in London that we don't have in Silicon Valley, and in my opinion, gives us a great advantage, because we are a hub for creative people across all disciplines and industries. And from design to fashion to advertising to video games, computer animation in the UK, and in particular in London, it's a crucible of creative talent. And I'm really privileged to see this firsthand in my role as co-chair of the Creative Industries Council. So if I think beyond our market and I look for creative stimulus, I think that's another key ingredient for growth. And you know what? I can't think of a better city than London for that. And the role of a global creative hub is really one of the reasons that the UK is so important to Facebook. Because the UK has long pioneered the exploitation of new media for commercial benefit. And for us, that's an important reason for us continuing to expand and continuing to invest here. And that's one of the reasons we're moving offices in about 3 weeks' time, got new offices, which we're excited about, because we've also brought our engineers here now, and we're doubling and tripling the numbers of engineers that we had here. And again, a year ago, we had 0, so the numbers are growing very rapidly. And the UK has long led Europe when it comes to mobile. 41% of people in the UK are expected to use a tablet regularly, compared to just 31% for people in the other top 5 EU countries. And then I think about the fantastic startups that are being built in the UK, like Yplan and Halo. And if our tech scene continues to embrace mobile, as we're seeing that it is doing, then we're going to see businesses that are starting here in the UK that are going to become international players very, very quickly. And I'm really excited to see those sorts of businesses that are being and will continue to be built, born and bred in Britain. Now let me say just a few words about how we see the future. Today, just over 1/3 of the world's population has access to the internet, and adoption's growing by less than 9% a year. With almost 5 billion phones in the world, we'll expect that to change, and mobile's going to be the key vehicle. Internet.org is a global partnership between Facebook and other technology leaders, non-profits, local communities and experts who are working together to bring the internet to the other few billion people that currently do not have access to it. Why are we doing this, and why am I telling you, and why is it relevant to what's going on in Africa or parts of Asia? I'll tell you why. Because I think the knowledge economy is key to all of our futures. By bringing everyone online, we're not only going to improve billions of lives, but we'll also improve our own, because we're going to benefit from the ideas and productivity that they are going to contribute to the world. because it's the devices that we carry in our pockets that are key to unlocking growth, not just for UK entrepreneurs, but for businesses and organisations all over the world. Mobile and platforms like Facebook, in particular, can give you the opportunity not only to reach people wherever they are at an unprecedented scale, but to do it in a highly personalised and relevant way. So we have the tools to make business personal again and create experiences like the ones that my grandfather used to have with his customers. And do you know what? I can't wait to see what all of you are going to deliver. Thank you very much.
Now, we're not letting Nicola escape quite so soon, because I'd love to pick up on a couple of the points that you raised. And one of the things, whenever anybody mentions Facebook, you can't help but think of this sort of extraordinary, this phenomenal speed of growth. And as my colleague Stuart actually earlier put it very well, he said they're a bit like one of those Hollywood child actors. He said they never had a proper adolescence, a proper childhood. Now, I'm not suggesting for a minute that you're the Macaulay Culkin of the, you know, of the tech business. I mean, clearly, I see you more as a successful Drew Barrymore type. Okay. However, before I get tied up in my analogy too much, what is it like for a company like Facebook to have become so big so fast? I mean, culturally, do you ever feel there are some kinks there that could do with being ironed out, that maybe if you've been a bit smaller for a bit longer, it would have been easier?
It's such a great question. The culture is really at the heart of everything that is successful about Facebook. It's an incredibly open culture. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg does a weekly Q&A with the whole company that he's done on a Friday every single week since the business started. And I think it feels still like a small business. It feels like a hungry startup business. We don't have a lot of bureaucracy in the business. We want people to focus on the fact that a good idea can come from anywhere. Any engineer, anybody on the business side, if they've got an idea that needs to happen, it will happen, and it's a good idea. It will happen quickly. So it's really retained its restlessness and its desire to stay true to the mission. And the mission has been there since day one, which was all about how to make the world more open and connected. And everything that we do is based around the mission.
And so for all the new engineers that you're recruiting at the moment, for example, you mentioned that you're moving offices and bringing this big new team in. I mean, will they genuinely feel that they could come to you any day of the week and say, I've got a brilliant idea, nobody else has thought of it?
Yeah.
And that does happen, does it?
Absolutely, because what we see and what we do with everybody that works for Facebook, everybody goes and spends some time on the main campus, first of all, out in the valley. And especially for the engineers, they go through a whole engineering boot camp so that they can see the ways in which we work and where it comes. But yes, good ideas come from anywhere, and they do.
Because often scaling up, you do lose a bit of the magic, don't you? But it sounds as if that you've got the recipe for maintaining the sizzle.
Yeah, because the culture is so important. And so it's quite a flat structure as well. And I mean, this was a business set up by a 20-year-old bloke who's never worked anywhere else. I think it just feels different. Dreams can come true, and they do.
You talked about all the different slogans you've got around the office to try and keep that sense of fast-moving unruliness sort of fresh in the company. And I can see how that would work in Silicon Valley and over in the States. Does it work over here when you've got posters up saying move fast and break things? You know, do people look at it slightly askance and say, hold on a minute, we don't quite do things like that here?
So again, what's so great about Facebook is that, yes, they're the ones that come from the core, but then they're the ones that get shipped back the other way as well. So we've got one that's nothing at Facebook is anybody else's problem. We're all in it together. And then they go back to the headquarters. They send us some, we send them, and it adapts and it varies. But it goes back to the mission, and it goes back to the heart of, and we test this with our own people. How do you feel about the mission? And literally, if you cut us with a stick of rock, people believe in the vision, embrace the mission, and that's what we're here to work towards. Very, very strong culture, and the success of the business is unquestionably about the strength of the culture.
You're talking about some of the new star companies that are emerging. Do you think we have got the chance to create a company as big as Facebook here in Britain? We've heard the stats, we're a positive bunch in this room, 88% think that we could. But do you genuinely see that, and where do you think we're going to find them?
I definitely do. I mean, there is so much innovation that is out there, and there is so much opportunity to do things in a completely different way. And if I just look a little bit at some of the recent acquisitions that we've brought, these were businesses, if I take Instagram, which joined Facebook a year ago, the business is 3 years old. It just hit 200 million people. It was a brilliantly simple idea built on the top. That idea could have come from anywhere. That idea, and especially what I was talking about with the creativity that we have in this country, it's a brilliant design idea about how you ship photography out in a new way. Should have come from here. We need to think about how we can really embrace and touch people in different ways. Another business that we're just going through the regulatory approval on at the moment is Oculus, a virtual reality business. You know, virtual reality, augmented reality has kind of been a dream for a very long time. It's here and it's now. And we're putting a very big bet on that we think this is going to be a really interesting way about how people disseminate information going forwards. What are the businesses that are going to be built on top of a platform like Oculus? That's a really interesting place to start. Adding creativity to that. And we see businesses like Framestore, which is a fantastic tech business here. Special effects won the awards for Gravity, the Oscar for Gravity. You know, they're working with these sorts of businesses over in Silicon Valley, and they're generating incredible content. So I think we just have to make sure that we're aware of the trends that are going on and that we're looking to scale big businesses around those.
I'd like to ask you in the audience, actually, as we've got Nicola here, if anybody else has got any questions, because we've got a couple of minutes left, and I'm very conscious we've got such fascinating people here. I want you to have a chance to put your two penneth in. Do we have a question for Nicola? This gentleman is taking off his spectacles in a forceful fashion. Okay, please, would you like to introduce yourself?
Stuart Rock. I just want to ask you, Nicola, about the European Court's ruling on the right to forget, the right to be forgotten, and whether there's anything on that judgment, but also whether there's anything in your career that you would apply to yourself.
We've already done my things I'd like to forget, so you know.
The right to forget is such a on your own personal life. Yes, I'm sure there's lots of things that I would probably not like to forget, and of course I've forgotten all of them right now. I think one of the challenges that we have in a world that's moving as fast as we have, and I'll talk more generally rather than on the specifics of that one, is how you create legislation and how governments create legislation at the speed of which the technology is developing, whilst understanding the implications as to what the knock-on effect of that was going to be. And so, you know, I think that's a challenge, and I think that's a challenge that governments are working through, and it's something that businesses like ours and Google and the other big tech companies are working very closely with governments in order that we can work together to share best learnings, best practice, and also to make sure we really understand what the implications of doing things might be. Because it's very easy to make knee-jerk policy, but actually could have really big long-term implications. Yes. And I'll think back on that, what the forget question is.
We will have to invite you back for another discussion, another confessional.
You and me together then.
I don't know, it's going to be a soap opera. Ladies and gentlemen, Nicola Mendelsohn, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.